Alright guys, so I hope you watched the events video. That'll cover more of how to cause something to happen. Now that we know how to cause something to happen, we want to know how to move or what the actions are to cause. So what we'll go ahead and do here, and I have a couple different things here just ready for that project. So grab this. There we are. So we've talked about the events, how to create something or cause something to happen. For instance, when trigger is entered by a player, um, then we want this. And so the second tab here is going to be motion. These are going to be things that, for instance, the block, and we'll take a look at here in a second, to cause that block to go from one place to another, as well as a few other things that we'll cover here. So you're going to have to and by. So move to is going to tell us exactly where we want to move it to. No matter where it is in the world, it's always going to go to that one place. Move by tells us wherever that object is, we want it to move by a certain amount. So I don't care if the block's there. If it's there, I want it to move over 5 units. If it's over here, I want it to move over 5 units based on its current location. Rotate to and rotate by is going to be the same thing. Rotate to is going to tell it to, no matter where it is, to always rotate to a certain place. Whereas rotate by, wherever it's rotated, if it's laying flat, it'll rotate up. If it's up, it'll rotate down. It's based on what its current rotation is. And then scale to is to grow an object or get it to a smaller object. It's grow or shrink basically. Then you have motion over time, and this is one of my favorites just because if you look move to over time or move by over time, it's the same thing over here. Move to is going to tell it to go to a specific location, whereas move by tells it to move not to a certain location but by a certain measurement. So move to over time tells it, well, I don't want it to just go to that place right away and teleport. I want it to slowly move across the screen by 5 seconds, 6 seconds, however much it is. So if I put this here, you'll see it shows me a vector, where in the world I want to move it to, and how long does it take for that object to get there. Whereas if I just say move by or move to, it doesn't give me a time frame because it's going to do it instantly. The other items here, so all these are going to be the same for over here, just over time it's going to be a smooth transition. We also have player motion, so this is going to be you as the player. If something happens, this will respawn you to a certain place, and we'll cover that here in a second. And I've actually made a gun that if you get shot by, you respawn, or a sword that if you get stabbed by, you respawn. In this case, we'll talk about it here in a second. I have it based on a button. If I push a certain button, it'll respawn me to a certain location. Physical motion, so an object that you make, for instance, let's say I grab this square here and I go into it, I can make this object physical. And what it does is now it has gravity. Now it'll drop wherever I put it. Oh, okay, so it's up here. So wherever I put it, it doesn't matter. It's always going to drop because it has a physic to it. So if I come over here, if I disable object physical motion, what that does is it causes it to freeze. That way it's not going to fall. But if I cause something to freeze and I want to unfreeze it, that's where you get the enable object physical motion. Push and push with mass, those are just pushing objects away from another location. Same thing with push and local space with mass. Those are going to be basically push, but with other special characters. Spin is going to do exactly what it says, cause an item to spin. And then launch from object. This one won't necessarily push where it just pushes something over. This one will actually shoot it with a certain speed. So if I click launch, if you look, number right here is the speed that it shoots out of. So if I do, let's say 3, if I shoot an object from this, it'll come here and then fall. But if I turn this to 50, it'll shoot straight out and go way over there. And so the higher the number, the larger the push is, basically, but it's launching. And so that's kind of all the actions there as far as movement goes. I guess we will go ahead and cover this, which is actions. So other than movement, you can cause objects to do other things. So show object and hide object are whether it's visible or invisible. Paint object is what I've actually done with a controller that we'll look at here in just a moment. Enable object and disable object. What that'll do is if let's say you have a trigger zone, well, if you enable it, that trigger zone, every time you go into it, will cause something to happen. But if I disable it, nothing you do will cause that to set something to go through. Set simulated. So set simulated is very similar to the movement, basically giving it physics or taking away the physics, although this will also take away the ability to grab something. Set gravity, you can make something lower gravity so that if I pick something up and throw it, for instance the block, it'll just come right down, but if I lower the gravity, if I throw it up, it'll kind of float away. So that's going to be set gravity. Display text is going to be items like this, where if I want the text to hide until you do something and then it pops up, well, that would be caused by this here, display text. Play animation, pause animation, and stop animation. We'll go through animation later, but what it is you can create or you can cause an object to basically play as an animation, however you want to record it, and then play. And sound, so it goes back to the initial video where we covered the menu. And if you look at the menu, there's sounds, and you have different sounds that you can select. So this right here, playing a sound or stopping a sound, will basically enable or disable that sound block. And then particles and trails, so we have what's called under gizmos, particles. So as you can see, anytime this activates, and let's go ahead and put it on a loop there. So this right here, we can play this object. So if I, let's say, have a gun and I want this smoke to be at the end of it, every time I pull the trigger on that gun, I want this smoke to burst. So that would be play. If I have something like this where it's constantly playing but I want it to stop, then I could do stop visual effects. For instance, if I have water and a fire, I could pour the water over the fire and then this physical effect would stop. And then reset world state. So this is really nice. It's basically a variation of this debug option. Let me delete this, where it says stop world, play world, and reset. So basically, if you don't want to go in here to reset the world, you want to be able to do it from your world for whatever reason, you can actually put that on an object, so when you pull a trigger or when you go into a certain door, everything behind you resets back to normal. So that's going to be all the actions there, and the reason those are good for is on this one here, I only have two actions. Well, basically three. I have the action to move to, so if you look at teleports, and then move by. So I have it moving by, I think, 2 seconds, but a move to will automatically teleport it. So that's the difference between those two objects. And then as far as the respawn goes, if I push this button here, what I can do is cause myself to respawn to that location. So those are just three methods of using all those different actions. And it's up to you to put them in any manner that you want it to be. In this case, let me see if I can find my button script. So this remote that I've created here, what I have, and this is kind of a variation of what we had in the original events video, is my event is the trigger is pulled, and when the trigger is pulled, I have four different actions. One action is to move my block, which is that item up there, and that's going to be variables, and we'll go over variables in a later video. My block will go to this vector or this location. But at the same time, I want my trigger button on this remote to turn a certain color, and then I want my B and A button to turn into a different color, so this button and this button. And then when my button 1 is pressed down, you'll notice it changes the colors again, but then it moves this to a different place. And this is the block up there. And up here, you'll find block. There's no time frame. That's why it jumps. It teleports to its location. But down here, it says over time or over a number. So if I change this, that's over 1 second. If I change this to, let's say, 5, we'll test that out here in just a second. Remember that though. And then press button 2. What'll happen is it'll change the colors again so that only button 2 is red, but then it respawns the player to the respawn point, and my respawn point in this case is this object here, so I've tied it together. One of the questions that I'll go ahead and quickly cover is finding these vectors, or what is a vector? So a vector, if I pull this object out and I look at the attributes here, you're going to notice this object has a certain rotation, has a certain scale, and has a certain position. If I grab this and I move it, you're going to notice those. If I rotate it, the rotations will change based on where it is. If I move it in the physical world, only my location will actually change. And then if I scale it, so if I grab this and this, and I bring it big or small, my scale changes. So just by moving objects like that, you can see exactly what numbers to put in this. And that's exactly how I figured out where I wanted to move this block here, is I pulled up the attributes of it and looked at it, and I moved it to this place and then just copied the numbers over. Then I moved it to where the second place I wanted it to be, and then put those in the second vector. And so that's an easy way to kind of code your vectors to those objects. So again, now that when we look at this, when I push the A button or the B button, that's what causes this color to turn red and these two to turn white, and then at the same time, it moves it over 5 seconds. If I pull the trigger, it causes both of these to go white and this to go red, and then it teleports. So remember we did 5 seconds and a little bit ago, it was slowly going up. Well, now that we raised the number, it's going to take longer to even go up. So it's going to take, it's going to take a slower path. And then again, we're going to go back to that A button. By clicking it, it respawns the player holding it back to the invisible spawn point over here. If you have any questions whatsoever, please go ahead and put it down in the comments. I'll do my best to answer it as I go. I know I'm going over a lot of it at one time, but there's a lot to scripting. And as we go on, we'll create more advanced objects, such as I have a working plane that you can actually drive, and it's using a few different variables and things in there, and just anything that you can imagine. As long as you know what you're trying to do, you can cause anything to happen in the world. But thank you for watching my third video here. I really do appreciate it, and I hope you guys have a great day.